Business rock stars, let me introduce you to a game-changing sponsor, Plains Equipment Rentals. They're not just here to make waves. They're here to revolutionize the way the equipment rental business is done across Western Canada. Looking for the right equipment to tackle your next big project? Look no further than Plains. Featuring an extensive array of machinery, from front wheel loaders to excavators and a plethora of attachments, they offer all you require to accomplish your tasks with precision. And here's the cherry on top. They're an authorized dealer for Arctic snow and ice products. But Plains isn't just about renting equipment. They're about building relationships. They prioritize long-term partnerships, ensuring that you have a collaborative equipment partner every step of the way. So whether you're in construction, snow removal, excavation, or mining, Plains Equipment Rentals is here to support you. Visit www.plainsequipmentrentals.com or call 587-417-2488 to learn more and reserve your equipment today. Give Sean a call and let him know I sent you. Choose Plains Equipment Rentals and rock your next project. Thanks for listening to a word from our sponsor. Let's get back to the show. Welcome to episode 126 of the Business Development Podcast. And today we're chatting with Michael Badham about business simulators. Stick with us. This one's really cool.
The great Mark Cuban once said, "Business happens over years and years. Value is measured in the total upside of a business relationship, not by how much you squeezed out in any one deal." And we couldn't agree more. This is the Business Development Podcast, based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and broadcasting to the world. You'll get expert business development advice, tips, and experiences, and you'll hear interviews with business owners, CEOs, and business development reps. You'll get actionable advice on how to grow business. Brought to you by Capital Business Development, capitalbd.ca. Let's do it. Welcome to the Business Development Podcast. And now your expert host, Kelly Kennedy.
Welcome to episode 126 of the Business Development Podcast. It is with great pleasure that we welcome back Michael Badham, a seasoned expert in corporate finance, strategic planning, and executive leadership. As the managing director of the Georgian Angel Network and a business partner at Strategy Tools, Michael brings over 4 decades of invaluable experience to our discussion today. In today's episode, we will have the privilege of tapping into Michael's deep well of knowledge as he guides us through the intricate world of business simulation and its pivotal role in driving organizational transformations. With a wealth of expertise spanning various sectors across Canada, Michael will illuminate the methodologies, frameworks, and techniques that empower companies to navigate the complexities of change in today's dynamic business landscape. From scenario planning to agile methodologies and change management frameworks, Michael will provide us with a comprehensive understanding of how businesses can leverage simulation to anticipate challenges, seize opportunities, and thrive in an ever-evolving marketplace. Welcome back to the show, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's great to be here, Kelly.
Man, I've been excited about this. When we first had our initial conversation, I knew this was going to be 2 shows. I wanted one on angel networks and VC and one on simulation, because simulation is something that is absolutely critical in so many industries. And yet it's not something that you typically see in business. And so when we kind of initially had this conversation, I was like, this is awesome. We haven't had anything like this on the show, and I'm really excited to talk about it. But we've actually done a previous show. And for those that are just tuning into this one, can you just give them an update as to who is Michael Badham? You know, how did you get here?
Well, I started my career after graduating from the University of Waterloo in mathematics and computers with Pete Marwick, one of the predecessor firms of KPMG. And because I started my career in 1980, right at the beginning of a recession, a lot of us were pushed into the restructuring world. And as a result of that, we were keenly focused on rebuilding and restructuring businesses that have found themselves in financial difficulty. And I found a real passion for helping people reorganize their businesses, and build strategies to change with the ever-changing world. I went from there to private equity at Power Financial Capital. I went from there to Nesbitt Burns in investment banking, and ultimately ended up as a partner in Deloitte, running their corporate finance group across Canada. I left Deloitte around 2009 and went on my own personal journey, helping startups find funding, and also helping people, in the startup scale-up world, developing their plans for growing. I was quite taken back by an interview I heard with one of the CFOs of Google, who I guess in 2002 or 2003 was tasked with the job of hiring 30,000 people. And I began to think, whoa, what would it be like to hire 30,000 people? And that got me really fascinated in and passionate about helping people scale up massively and what that looks like. But to sort of fast forward to this discussion, Kelly, it was around 2020, just as COVID was striking, that I began to realize that we were teaching strategy and we were facilitating strategy the same way in 2020 that I was doing it in the 1980s, using Porter's 5 forces, using SWOT analysis, and very much our methodology was, we'll show you what we're going to do, and now we'll do it for you, and we'll give you a report, and the board can approve it. We'll engage the board with you a little bit, but we were really doing it for you or to you. And I thought to myself, boy, the whole world is transformed. Everything is changing. Everything is going digital. And now we're heading into COVID. There must be a better way of facilitating strategy. And, I've been teaching almost throughout my whole career, whether it's teaching business valuations or teaching corporate finance at colleges and universities, or for the CPA profession. And I realized that we weren't really delivering strategy with the tell me, show me, let me try adult learning model. We were still just giving people PowerPoints and checklists. Mm-hmm. And you can't teach somebody to ride a bike with a PowerPoint and a checklist. You have to put on training wheels and let them try. And you don't teach an airline pilot to fly a plane with a PowerPoint. You say, here, go in a simulator and practice until, you're learning. So I went on a journey. I went on a personal mission to really explore what was going on. I reached out to all the major universities. I had done some work in 2012 with the U.S. military, and I reached back out to them in terms of what were they doing in terms of strategic planning, and how they taught strategic planning to their leadership group. And finally, my colleagues at Deloitte introduced me to a gentleman named Christian Rangen out of Norway, and he was identified by Deloitte as one of the top 22 people in 2022 that you should meet. And so I reached out to him, and he invited me to a master class in Norway with 16 other people from around the world who were all interested in redefining the role of strategy in corporations that were massively growing or that were transforming because of digital transformation that was going on in the world. And immediately I identified with what they were doing. And besides a whole series of modern tools, and when I say tools, think about that business development canvas that people use. But, strategy tools and Christian Rangen have developed 300 different canvases, right? Wow. It's like, you've heard that expression, we've got an app for that. Well, we have a canvas for that, right? You tell me your needs and what you're doing. I got a canvas for that. Yeah. The other thing about modern tools is that strategy needs to evolve from the bottom up. We, as I said, we used to deliver it from the top down, but in fact, every employee in your organization now is a sensor. They're monitoring, they're watching, they're listening, they're talking to customers, they're talking to suppliers, they're talking to other employees, and you have to gather all of the data from those sensors and build your strategy from the bottom up, right? And so this is a complete reversal of the way we've done it before. I think also as a result of COVID, we're in a world now where hybrid and digital technologies are really important. So, we used to have this expression, Kelly, where, the strategy document is a living document. We're gonna revisit it, but you and I both know that it came in a PowerPoint and we put it in a drawer. And what using modern tools like Miro boards, digital whiteboards, which have really become very, very user-friendly and very easy, we can build strategies on these boards, which make revisiting them from people all over the world. So you no longer have to gather your team and do a strategy, off campus, 3-day event, which everybody enjoys, but everybody knows doesn't really work. We can now use digital tools to gather people more regularly, more easily, more quickly, and really monitor and update the strategy periodically throughout the year by updating these digital boards. So you've got a new set of tools, you've got a new way of doing it from the bottom up, and you've got a way of using hybrid meetings and digital whiteboards to capture the information, evolve it, think about it, and update it over time. This has led Strategy Tools to develop a series of simulators. And these simulators, again, follow the adult learning of tell me, show me, let me try. And these simulators are just like an aircraft flight simulator. But if a flight simulator is a video based on a video platform, this looks like a board game. And your listeners need to imagine something that looks like a board game. And we don't like to call it a game because it really is a simulator, and we can adjust the learning objectives to the audience. So we specifically, if we want to practice fundraising, we can do that. If we want to practice transformation of an existing corporation into a new business area, we can practice that. But in order to create a level of stress and a level of focus, we gamify the simulation a little bit. So each of the different versions are played with 4 teams of 3 to 5 people, and we set a competitive benchmark. The first team to raise $50 million, the first team to go public, the first team to increase their market valuation X hundreds of millions. Whatever the objective is, we set those terms, and then we brief people on how the simulation will work, and then we let them essentially roll the dice and start moving around the board as if they were encountering events during the year and encountering strategic challenges. And we're finding that this tool people come out of it blown away by how much they've learned. I mean, it's almost a little embarrassing when you're doing it at a university and the students say to you, I've just finished my 4th year strategy class and I've learned more in the last 2 days than I learned all year. But that's the level of impact that comes out of this, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to that let me try, right? It's one thing to sit in a room and understand the theory. It's a whole nother thing. And everybody who has started a business, everybody who works in business or has learned a skill knows that they can only teach you so much. You learn, 80% to 90% of what you're going to know by actually doing that work, by actually day-to-day operations in a business, running a business, doing your craft or skill. That's how you learn. And so I think, you're kind of right. Like at the same time, it's like they could learn these theories all day long, but it's all just knowledge until they actually get a chance to execute.
So strategy is kind of interesting, right? Because it's not planning. It's not business planning. It's actually making strategic choices and allocating your resources appropriately based on the strategic choices you're making. And really the best way to learn to be a strategist is to practice it. You just have to practice. And the problem with being in a business is you don't want to practice with live ammo. You
Sure.
want to be in a safe, secure environment where you can take a few risks. Well, it didn't work out, did it?
Sure.
Let's try that again. Let's reload. Let's try the simulation again, and let's see if we can take a slightly different path.
Absolutely. Run us through, currently founders and startups have a few options available to them, right? Typically, there's an accelerator program or there's something else that they can hop into to just help them achieve growth in their organizations. Can you maybe explain to our listeners maybe the differences between an accelerator program or what they're learning there versus what they could learn with strategy tools?
Well, and we're incorporating our workshops and our simulators in various accelerators across Canada. So in many ways, I want to be able to work with accelerators and deliver the simulator to their cohort of founders and startups so that they can experience what it's like. And I've been talking to various accelerators about doing things like when you get a new cohort of founders that are going to run through let's call it a 20-week program with you, why don't we run them through the simulator on day one and see how they struggle, and then run them through again at the end of the program and see how much more they've learned in terms of doing it. But, currently simulators, accelerators will deliver through PowerPoint presentations, introducing people that have been there and done it before, introducing various subject matter experts. They put entire programs together. But none of them that I've run across, other than the ones we've worked with, offers some sort of simulation where you enter and it could go 1, 2, 3 days long, a period where you get to go from, start all the way through to IPO if you want to take it to the final place. Normally, we try and position it to run from startup to raising your $100 million round, or we can start it, you've got your seed round and now you're going to try and take it to IPO. But because just in how much there's just a limit to how much you can learn over a 2 or 3 day period, right?
Of course.
And what we try and do is factor in real life challenges that people run into where, they're talked about in academic circles, and you certainly in accelerators have people that you can seek their advice from, but you don't get to practice it. So an example would be in one of the scale-up simulations we run. They're all the teams are building their business. They've done a couple of rounds of financing, but I've set the teams up with there's 2 co-founders, and then there's a key employee. And then there's, a contracted CFO. And the 2 founders and the key employee, I give the key employee some information about how important they are to the business. They, in a sense, know the secret sauce. So the first thing that the founders have to do is they have to negotiate an employment contract with the key employee. And, you've talked about it, but have you ever done it? Have you ever gone face to face with somebody and said, okay, we're 50% founders. How much equity do you want in this, right? And they have to solve that problem. Well, then we run the simulator for a period of time, maybe over in simulation years, we let it run 3 or 4 years, where the business now has some value. It probably has, let's call it a $50 million pre-money value. I then call the key employees out of the room, and I ask them to take the position that they're frustrated and angry, and they want more equity. They're going to sue the founders for more equity. And so we put them back in the room, and I say to everybody, you now have 30 minutes to strike a deal with your key employee or you go bankrupt, right? And so they're under time pressure to get a deal. And you have no idea how intense this 30 minutes can be, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's checking their emails. Nobody, they are driven to get an agreement. And in not the last time, but 2 times ago when we did this, the groups were still fighting the next morning, right? Like they couldn't let it go. And you remember I was telling you earlier that we don't like calling it a game, right? But I literally had to say, it's a simulation. It's okay. Put it down, right? Yeah. We need to move on now, right? So we know those learnings take place, right? We know that, and the more you practice it, the better you get at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I see this as being so valuable. And it actually surprises me a little bit, Michael, that this hasn't been around for 20 or 30 years at this point. Like, it actually blows my mind because you're right. A simulation for business is incredibly valuable. Why do you think it just hasn't been a thing?
A lot of universities and will use case studies. And in many ways, a case study is a short simulation, right? You put yourself in a role and you're in a case study and you solve it. So in many ways, at many of the universities, they are doing case studies. But I'm surprised, given the technology that we now have, that more people haven't done this. And we just keep improving the simulation every time we offer it. And I think now Strategy Tools has offered the simulation some 300 times around the world.
Wow.
This is the other thing that strikes me as really interesting is that, my colleagues in Europe are offering it all throughout Europe, Dubai, Singapore. It's happening all over the world. And I'm, Stuart Morley and myself are trying really hard to offer this to the Canadian accelerators and Canadian universities, because I think this is kind of like the capstone to a great business program, right?
Absolutely. And, for the listeners who are listening who didn't hear the first episode, Michael, the thing that I find really awesome about this is the fact, that you are the managing director of the Georgian Angel Network. And so who better would know or want you to succeed, want this program to work than somebody who is looking for potential companies to invest in that are geared for success? I think that pairing of having somebody in your position who would at some point make a buying decision on whether or not you were going to, become an angel for a company and to kind of help them take it to the next level to some point where they can get to be VC, you're the right person for this. You're the right person to help develop a program to make them successful, because it is in both your best interests that they are successful.
Thank you for that. I think that the true measure of success of an accelerator is what percentage of the companies that graduated from your program were able to get financing, were able to get that seed round of funding done that got them launched. And the numbers out of the programs are not that high. They're not that good. Even the best in the world, like Y Combinator, I believe that, it is around 50% of their companies get funding going forward. And I know that accelerators in Canada, that number is less than 15%. Wow. Go on to get funding. So, there is I am able to apply my knowledge of how to raise a seed round with angel investors, how to work with VCs. I am able to apply that to the simulator. So one of the areas that we do focus on is actually putting together rounds of financing. So as you're going through the simulator, as a startup, scale-up business, as you're moving your piece around the board, you are meeting different investors. And what you have to do is gather a group of investors and then work to pull them together as a syndicate. Find a group of investors that are like-minded, that fit with your objectives, that agree with your valuation, your pre-money valuation, and then you basically have to pull that syndicate of investors together. What happens is you bring it to the operators of the simulator, and then we act as the regulator, and then we approve that financing, and then you go ahead and get the money, and that enables you to invest in hiring more people and growing your business and doing all those other important parts. But we have tended to focus on what it's like and how difficult it is to pull that syndicate of investors together. And that's just a real skill that you just need to practice. And if you think about it, if you're a successful founder, there are founders who have had multiple successes. So they started businesses, more than one time. But you've likely only done one round of seed funding, maybe two rounds of seed funding in your life. And, if I were to ask you the question, how many seed rounds of financing do you think you need to do before you can call yourself an expert in seed round financing, right? It's not one or two, right? Sure. It's going to be dozens. And so there are really very few people in the world that have done dozens of seed round financings. And you're going to find those people, working with the angel groups, working in the accelerators. But I really believe that by having built this into the simulator, that people get real life experience of what it's like to do this kind of finance.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those things where you're right. Like there would be a very limited amount of experts. Most of the experts I imagine are actually the mentors, not the companies. Because like you said, they might only do it once or twice in their lives.
Yep.
But I feel like the mentors in these organizations tend to be working alongside them. You mentioned though, a statistic that actually just blew my mind a little bit. 15 to 20% is all that makes it through typically to a seed round funding stage.
It's a low number. Like it's an interestingly low number, right? And part of that, you don't expect them all to succeed because they didn't achieve product market fit or their idea. Some of that is normal, right? But some of that, you can blame on, well, there just isn't the amount of financing that's available. Part of it is people just don't know how to do it, right? There's some combination of issues here, right? And, you mentioned mentors. And one of the use cases for the simulators that we found really interesting is what I call coaching mentors. So you go to an accelerator and you say, can we work with all of your mentors and your subject matter experts and run them through the simulator so they now know what it's like to start up a business? Because many of them are seasoned executives with huge skills, usually in a particular vertical. They're marketing specialists, they're technology specialists, they're organizational leadership specialists. They might be financing, but nowhere have they, they're not the successful entrepreneur that's been through 3 or 4 startups, right? And so here's an opportunity for the mentors to learn what their mentees are actually going through in terms of the stresses of building a business on multiple dimensions. And we've found that to be a really fascinating use case.
Wow. So what you're suggesting is that there's actually probably a pretty large disconnect between some of these mentors and the companies they're menteeing.
Well, they're subject matter experts and they're bringing a particular expertise to the table. But there's no, to use the sporting analogy a little bit further, there's no head coach, right? Who's saying, well, we have a physiotherapist, we've got a swing coach, we've got an athletic aerobic coach, we've got a strength training coach. So you have marketing coaches, you have leadership people, you have organizational skills, you have marketing, sales, but who's bringing it all together? And so when you run mentors through the simulator, they all get a very much an aha moment in terms of the multidimensional challenge that their mentees are facing, right?
In your expert opinion, what are some of the challenges that you think some of the companies that aren't going through a program like this, that aren't using, something like strategy tools, when they come to you, when they're pitching to you, what do you think they're missing that they maybe wouldn't be missing had they went through a program such as strategy tools?
I would say that there are probably 3 broad areas. The first one, we talked about it, is just the experience of having pulled a financing together. What are all the moving parts? How do you talk to investors? How do you pull that all together? I think the second part, which we see quite a bit, is that they haven't necessarily achieved product market fit. And everybody knows they have to get to product market fit, but they kind of hit a bit of the end of the runway where they're out of money, and so they just want to try and convince investors that they've got product market fit, but they haven't got all of the evidence, all of the data to support that they have product market fit. And we also go through a little bit of a challenge with them defining what product market fit is. How do you know when you've got product market fit? Or is it one of those things that when you have it, you'll know it? You get product market fit when your customers enthusiastically or spontaneously tell their friends about your product. That's when you know you've got it. So if that's the definition, how do you measure that? How do you measure that your customers are, your beta customers are so happy that they're spontaneously telling their friends about it? And that piece, I think needs a lot of work, and they get real, they face real challenges doing that in the simulator.
Yeah.
And I would say the third part is hiring people. Like, it's really hard to hire people, and even extending the hiring to choosing who your mentors and coaches will be, because you're exposed and introduced to all these people. But it's really hard as a founder, particularly a young founder, to sit back and say, are these in fact the right advisors for me? Are these the right mentors for me? And because I'll often find that people will come to Georgian Angel Network and and say, well, my advisor said that, we should ask for a pre-money valuation of 10 million. And I'll say, yeah, but you don't have any sales. And, what we're seeing is that your pre-money valuation should be closer to 2 or 3 million. And they'll want to engage with me in a discussion. But all I can say to them, you have to go back to your mentors and say, where did that number come from? How do you know it's right? So they don't have necessarily a critical thinking lens on challenging their advisors necessarily. Right? And again, in the simulation, you get a chance to do that. You get a chance to actually, are we actually doing this right? Like, whose advice are we taking?
And I think that's a really tough space for founders, especially ones that are really trying to grow. Maybe they are like straight out of university. They just don't have that life experience yet. And, these mentors come in and they are the experts as far as, most of these founders are concerned. And so I think you're right. I think that, a little bit of life experience would lead them to maybe question a little bit more. But I think some of these people are quite young. What advice might you give those people?
Number one, I'd say get yourself into an accelerator, right? And get yourself into an accelerator that will allow you to practice, that will actually allow you to try out things, either through case studies or simulations. You've got to practice this, If I were telling you to ride a bicycle, I wouldn't give you a PowerPoint and a checklist. I wouldn't even introduce you to Tour de France bike riders who have obviously got huge experience. I'd say, you know what? Put on a set of training wheels, put on a helmet, put on some pads, and go give it a try, right? It's if you're overwhelmed, when you're young and trying this out, and to a certain extent, Kelly, there's this sort of line that goes around. Oh, fail often, fail fast. Failure's okay. I can tell you that if you are a young person coming out of university and you devote 2 or 3 years to a startup and you fail, this is PTSD stuff. This is devastating, right? And you relied on your family and friends for support, and now you've gotten nowhere. How much better would it have been if before you started down that 3-year journey, you spent 3 days in a simulator and you're really determined, am I cut out for this? Is my idea good enough? Can we move forward with this? And then get yourself into an accelerator and make it happen.
Would you recommend that a company go through essentially something like strategy tools ahead of an accelerator or coinciding with?
Coinciding with, part of. It's really taking what you're learning in the accelerator program and applying it. Right? And so I think it's an addition to, it's part of a full program.
Michael, this could not have been easy to develop. I just, I think of what you were talking about before, and there's basically a scenario for everything. Can you walk us through what it was like to develop such a complex simulator?
I can tell you that there's a group of people around the world that we get together monthly, and we compare notes on every simulation that's being done. And we're always adding things to it, always updating it, always keeping it current for current market conditions. And so part of building it is you start with a basic simulator, and then you just keep adding to it all the time. And it's just getting to the point now where each of the 4 verticals that we're in with the simulator has now had a number of years of experience. And as I said, we've done them over 300 times around the world. And we meet as a group monthly, always enhancing it. And it's that constant enhancing, constantly adding new challenges, constantly changing for changing market conditions, valuations going up, the IPO market closed, whatever the condition is. So we're always updating it. And I think that's what makes the simulation so real, is that we're really applying current market conditions in the simulator every time we operate it.
Tell me a little bit about what it is like to actually go through the simulator and maybe some of the different use case applications. Like we've been focusing really hard on, founders and startups and tech stuff, but it's better for more things than that, right? Or it has more use case applications than that. Can we go through all the use cases and then maybe how it might help an organization aside from just a startup or a founder?
So the original simulator was built, it's called Transform, and it was built to help larger corporations adapt to digital transformation. So you can imagine, hundreds, even thousands of employees trying to figure out how are we going to change our behaviors and the way we set our planning goals to adapt to all of the new digital opportunities that are out there. And in the world of strategy, what people are mostly looking at is not linear development of new ideas, but a portfolio approach to new ideas. So think about the corporate venture capital group, that there's a group within the corporation that's looking at all kinds of new ideas and trying to figure out how these fit within the organization. So this transform simulation allows employees from a single corporation to identify areas of growth and areas that need to be explored in order to modernize and transform their business. And this all came out of some research that was done a few years ago, that when they interviewed Fortune 500 CEOs, there was some crazy number that said that when asked the question, what percentage of your current business do you expect to still have in 2030? And the number, the median was something like 7%. So
wow.
Like more than, I think they interviewed like 200 Fortune 500 CEOs, and the median response was 7% of our current business will still exist in 2030. So they were all looking at where the new revenues would come from. In order to transform your organization, you have to get all your employees on board with this. And so we've been running this transform simulation for literally hundreds of employees at a particular corporation.
Wow.
And I can tell you one anecdotal story. 100 employees of this corporation ran through a 3-day simulation in the financial services area. And when it was all over and we were doing the reflection and recap at the end with the CEO, there were a small group of people in the room who said, this is all fascinating stuff, but you pay me to do a job. I'll just do my job. Whatever strategy you choose, I'm happy to implement, but I don't really want to do this. I just want to do my job. And the CEO was so shocked by that he basically said, no, I need every one of my employees to be a strategist. I need every one of my employees to be alert to new opportunities. So he invited them all to meet with the HR department in the morning and leave the firm.
Wow.
Like it was really that dramatic, right? Because you really are trying to train your people. You want everybody in your organization to be thinking about strategy at least part of their time, right? To help you transform. Just think about the large auto companies, right? And moving into electric vehicles. Think of the kind of human change that's needed in order to affect that, right? So we have the transform simulation is one vertical. And another vertical that we've had quite a bit of interest in is actually the vertical of being a venture capital firm. So there's very few places. There are a couple of universities around the world that offer courses on, how to run a VC firm. But again, you don't get to try, right? So you start off in a VC firm. Hopefully you can get a job there, and you learn by working there. But there's nowhere that you can go and practice. So we built a simulator for building a VC fund, going out and there's two sides to the business. You have to raise funds from limited partners, big institutions, and at the same time, you have to be chasing deal flow and finding deal opportunities and investing in them. And so that simulation is also really interesting for students that are coming out of university and are looking at a job in private equity or venture capital. And we've been doing some work with the Canadian Venture Capital Association, rolling parts of our simulation out to universities across Canada. And it's been really, really well received.
It sounds like very complex, right? Like to do what you do, whether you're an angel or you're in venture capitalism, or whether you're in venture capital, the reality is that you almost have to know more about business than the people that are operating businesses, because in order to make a good decision, you almost need to understand it better than they do.
Well, and you have to have a growth strategy, and you have to have an ability to really work with the CEOs and bring the best out of them in order to have the best success growing the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another use case is with angel investors, and we've done this a couple of times at Georgian Angel Network, where we've invited people who are not angel investors to experience what it's like to be an angel investor. So we run them through a small simulation where we show them 4 different companies, and we give them a couple of $1 million, and we say, now invest in a portfolio of businesses and work with them over a period of time, and we use a couple of dice to determine what the value of each of the companies is at various stages through the simulation, through the case study. And you'll have people who really liked one business and not so much the other, so they put all their money in one spot. You'll have other people who evenly distributed their funds across all businesses. You'll have people that picked and chose and actually left money available for follow-on rounds later on. And of course, you roll the dice, and what happens. But it's a real learning experience for people, is to understand how to make an investment decision based on the information you have, right?
It sounds so valuable, Michael. So valuable. Congratulations on, being part of a team that created something so that's going to have so much potential impact on the world. The reality is it's so needed. And anybody who understands simulations and what they do for you, we talked about this earlier, and it sounds kind of silly and it's not really the same thing. But as a kid, I spent a ton of time learning how to fly remote controlled airplanes and helicopters. I've been a little bit of an airplane junkie my whole life. You can see I have an airplane on my wall. I absolutely just love flying and airplanes and such. But learning how to fly an RC aircraft is not an easy task. It is very complicated. It is very hard. It is very much the same as flying a real aircraft, but you're doing it from the ground, from a single point perspective. And when that airplane turns and flies at you, all of your controls are actually reversed. And so in the real world, if you were learning how to fly these things without a simulator, you would crash thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into the ground before you would ever learn how to do it correctly. And so learning on a simulator was a very critical part of that process for me, and probably saved me thousands of dollars over time. And now, I don't crash, but there was a time when I crashed all the time.
That's so funny, because I look at those videos of people flying RC jets, and I keep thinking to myself, how did they learn to do that? Because that's like a $10,000 toy. How did you learn to do that, right?
Yeah, simulator.
Yeah, I'm going to look one up now.
Yeah, no, I used to fly those RC jets. I used to fly helicopters, you name it. I don't get out much anymore with family and work and life. It gets in the way. But there was a time when I was out almost every weekend doing that. And yeah, practice makes perfect, but practice makes perfect in everything, including business. And if you can try something and not lose your real money, that is going to be a much better way to learn than if you were crashing and burning every single time. Michael, run me through the various program offerings.
We've got a vertical for venture capital funds and running a fund. We call it Fund Manager. We have a scale-up startup simulator. We have a scale-up startup simulator for angel investors, so that you can practice angel investing. And we can actually put the angel investor simulation together with the scale-up, so that we can actually have founders and angels in a room working together and doing that. We also have the Transform corporate simulator for simulating transformational strategy implementation at organizations. And we also have a simulator for ecosystems that want to figure out how to build a startup investment ecosystem that includes, the municipal governments, the universities, the hospitals, the founders, the investors. You bring everybody together in an ecosystem, and how do you help that ecosystem work together to identify gaps and also just coordinate what everybody's doing to create an environment where startups and scale-up businesses are growing. Right? So those are the basic verticals that we have.
And they sound obviously very complex. I imagine this isn't something that runs in an hour and a half, like a typical board simulator or board game. What is a typical length of time to run this strategy from start to finish?
The ideal length of time is 3 days, which allows a little bit of time at the beginning to go through some of the more detailed technical knowledge that you will need. For instance, if you're trying to put an investment syndicate together, you really need to know how to prepare a cap table. And so some founders know how to do it, others don't. So there's a couple of hours of just prepping people. And then you need a little bit of time at the end, a couple of hours for people to reflect on what they've gone through, what they've learned, and how they can apply that learning to their own specific real project. And so between those two, if you ran the simulator for, 8 hours or 10 hours in between those two gaps, you would get a good amount of experience. So we can run them in 3 straight days. The shortest period of time that we'll do it is a day, but it's really like a sampler. It's more of a team building exercise than it is actually moving the mark a little bit. If we do it in a day, I generally like to have a couple of hours with everybody a week before, just to get everybody thinking about it and dealing with, the knowledge gap that everybody will have to bring everybody up to a minimum level. And we can do this, digitally, and we can do it in person in a big room. It works better in a big room, but it can also happen digitally, and you can bring in people remotely onto a Miro board where the simulation can exist. But yeah, so and as I said, we've looked at doing integrating into existing programs where we would do it at the beginning, in the middle and the end, or the beginning and the end, just to watch people's improvement.
I know we have a lot of organizations listening that are wondering, is this right for me? How would an organization know that this simulation could benefit them? Do you have maybe any key indicators that they might be experiencing in their organization, in their startup programs or something like that, where there's a gap that this would fill and they're not sure, how to look for that gap?
If an organization is facing competitive challenges and digital transformation issues, and they've gone through a typical strategic planning process, and they've come out of that feeling a little bit flat, then this is a way of engaging the whole team from all of your employees, and helping deal with the issue that just because you've chosen a new plan doesn't mean everybody in the organization buys into it. And sometimes the top-down leadership style doesn't work anymore. And if you've identified that and you really need to work with your employees and you're looking for new ideas, you're trying to decide what's core, what areas do we want to build on and naturally grow, their natural extensions of what we're doing, and what are completely new ideas that we should be exploring, we should have our eyes on, just to understand what's going on in that sector or that space. And you want to try and bring all of that together in a corporate strategy. That's where the simulation can be the most helpful.
And so if we have people that want to reach out, they're hearing this right now and they're like, yep, this is for me. How do they get a hold of you? How do they book a session with Strategy Tools?
Just call me, Strategy Tools Canada, and just reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. And you do work across Canada. Do you also work like around the world? You were mentioning other locations.
Oh, yeah. No. And we've done some remote work with Duke University. Stuart and I are probably going over to Norway this year again. And we're connected with this group globally. And when we did a transformation strategy simulator last September in Barrie, we brought up one of our colleagues from Panama to join in with us. And so we have access to people all around the world that we can bring in who are particular experts in an industry or a sector. And we just want to we bring that. So we're connected to a group of us around the world that we can bring in to help.
Perfect. Okay, so if you're hearing this and you're interested, it is strategytools.io is their website. You can go check it out. You can get a hold of Michael Badham and book your Strategy Tools session. This sounds super valuable, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking all about it. Obviously, we're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs. Do you have any words of advice, parting words of advice to encourage them to take those next steps? Business is hard, and sometimes they just need a little boost.
You know, what I like to say is many of the small business owners that I talk to are really because they're so busy, because there's so many challenges, they're really working hard, what I call in their business. I really encourage people to, once a week, take a couple of hours, change the hat from working in the business to working on the business. Think of yourself as an investor in your own business. And as an investor, what would you expect the CEO and the founders to be doing? What would you expect that business to look like a few years from now? Think like an investor just for a couple of hours every week. And I think if you do that, you'll start to develop some real interest in thinking about strategy, thinking about transforming your business model, thinking about transforming your product, thinking about what your customers really expect from your product in the future.
I love it. Think like an investor. That might be some of the best advice that we've had on this show yet, Michael. This has been episode 126 of the Business Development Podcast. We've been graced with Michael Badham, Managing Director of the Georgian Angel Network and business partner at Strategy Tools. It was an absolute honor to have him on the show. Until next time, this has been the Business Development Podcast, and we will catch you on the flip side.
This has been the Business Development Podcast with Kelly Kennedy. Kelly has 15 years in sales and business development experience within the Alberta oil and gas industry and founded his own business development firm in 2020. His passion and his specialization is in customer relationship generation and business development. The show is brought to you by Capital Business Development, your business development specialists. For more, we invite you to the website at www.capitalbd.ca. See you next time on the Business Development Podcast.
Business Development Podcast leaders, Hypervac Technologies has long been a sponsor of the show, but they are now breaking new ground with Hyperfab, a division set to revolutionize metal fabrication. Rooted in family-run service, Hypervac now introduces fiber laser cutting machines, reshaping the game in metal fabrication. Hyperfab's fiber laser cutters offer precision beyond compare, meeting modern standards flawlessly. Speed up your projects with remarkable efficiency, reducing production time and boosting productivity. Versatility is key, handling diverse materials and thickness for endless possibilities. In the competitive landscape, cost-effectiveness is paramount. Hyperfab's fiber laser cutters optimize resources, minimizing waste and energy consumption for sustainable, cost-efficient process. Safety takes the spotlight too, with advanced features ensuring a secure work environment. As leaders in duct cleaning equipment, Hypervac Technologies extends its commitment to excellence. Explore Hyperfab's cutting-edge technology at www.hypervac.com/Hyperfab. Elevate your metal fabrication with precision and innovation from Hyperfab.